All right, so let's dive into the situation in Redondo Beach, California, with this church that's been holding services right on the beach.
Church on the beach.
Yeah, church on the beach for 18 years every Sunday, and everything's been fine. They had their permits from Los Angeles County, and then all of a sudden,
Bam.
bam, the county's like, no more.
Yeah.
We've got this new policy, and it seems specifically designed to target religious gatherings on the beach.
It's definitely it's a very interesting situation, especially since it seems like non-religious groups are still allowed to use the beach freely. So
Right. Like, is this actual discrimination, or are we missing some piece of information here?
I think that's what we're here to find out.
Yeah, like, is
Well,
there a legitimate reason, or is this something more? So we're gonna try and figure that out today, and hopefully come up with some kind of solution that works, for everybody involved, respects religious freedom and public access, all that good stuff.
yeah, and hopefully understand, all sides of the issue.
Exactly.
Huh.
So let's start with a little background on Church on the Beach itself. So they've been part of Redondo Beach since 2007.
Yeah, they started as like an offshoot of Kings Harbor Church, and
Mhm.
they were doing everything by the book. They were even holding those yearly permits that the county requires. And then in July 2024, they decided to become their own independent nonprofit, which became official in September.
Oh, wow. So they were already going through this big transition as an organization when this new policy hit.
Talk about bad timing.
Yeah, that's got to be rough. Like, you're trying to establish yourself, and then bam, this huge roadblock.
Yeah.
And to be fair, they're not exactly a huge disruptive force on the beach, right? I mean, they've got about 120 attendees every Sunday.
Yeah, that's not even that many people when you think about a place like Redondo Beach. And they've always been super mindful of their impact, like no traffic jams from churchgoers, no complaints about noise, and they even encourage their members to pick up trash on the beach.
Wow. So they sound like they're going above and beyond to be good neighbors.
It seems like it, yeah.
So they're not causing problems. They've got permits. They're trying to do their own thing.
Yeah.
It's getting more confusing.
Yeah, it is. And then you add in the fact that this beach is more than just a random location for them. It's deeply meaningful to a lot of these people.
Right. It's not just a matter of convenience, it sounds like. For a lot of the attendees, worshiping on the beach is a really core part of their experience.
Absolutely. They talk about feeling this connection to something bigger than themselves when they're surrounded by the ocean, the sand, and the sky. It's like the beach itself becomes a sanctuary for them.
When I was reading through some of the accounts of the people who attend church there, what really struck me was how many of them talked about feeling judged or excluded from other churches.
Yeah, a lot of people feel like they don't fit in at traditional churches, maybe because of their lifestyle or their beliefs or even just how they look.
It's sad, but it's a reality for a lot of people, and they found that acceptance and belonging at Church on the Beach.
And it makes sense, right? Because the beach is like this naturally open and welcoming space.
Yeah, so for people who have maybe felt hurt or judged in other religious settings, a place like the beach can be incredibly healing.
It's like the beach itself becomes a symbol of acceptance.
So we've got this picture of a community that's really connected to their beachside worship, but then we've got this county policy that seems to be singling them out. And to understand why this is such a big deal, we need to talk about something called the public forum doctrine.
Public forum doctrine.
Yeah, it sounds kind of intimidating, but it's actually pretty interesting when you break it down.
Think of it like this. Imagine you're in a bustling town square. Historically, these have always been places where people gather to share ideas, to protest, to celebrate, to basically exercise their right to free speech.
Okay, so I'm picturing like a speaker on a soapbox, musicians playing maybe some heated debates.
Exactly. And that's really the essence of the public forum doctrine. It says that certain spaces like streets and parks and, yes, even beaches have this historical significance as places for public expression. And the government can't just come in and arbitrarily restrict that.
So it's not like they can say no political rallies in the park, but then let a gardening club meet there.
Exactly. That would be content-based discrimination, which is a big no-no according to the Supreme Court.
And that's what brings us back to Church on the Beach, the ACLJ, the American Center for Law and Justice, which is a nonprofit legal organization that defends religious freedom.
Oh.
They're representing the church, and they're arguing that this new policy is basically saying you can have a book club on the beach, but not a Bible study.
And they've got some serious legal precedent to back that up. In fact, in their demand letter to the county, they cited two landmark Supreme Court cases, Cornelius v. NAACP and Lamb's Chapel v. Center Morches School District.
Okay, those sound like they carry some weight.
Yeah.
So what exactly do those cases say, and how do they apply to this situation?
Well, Cornelius v. NAACP, which went all the way to the Supreme Court back in 1985, basically affirmed that public forums like parks and sidewalks have to be open to all kinds of expression on an equal basis. It's not enough for the government to say, oh, we allow free speech in this park. They have to make sure that everyone's free speech is protected equally, regardless of their viewpoint.
So it's not just about allowing free speech. It's about making sure everyone has a fair chance to use that.
Exactly. And Lamb's Chapel, which came a bit later in 1993, took that principle even further. In that case, a school district was trying to prevent a church from using its facilities for meetings after school hours, even though other community groups were allowed to use the space.
So it's like saying you can have a knitting club here, but no prayer groups allowed.
Exactly. And the Supreme Court shut that down. They said that the school district was discriminating against the church based on the content of their meetings, and that's a violation of the First Amendment.
So the ACLJ is basically drawing a parallel between those cases and what's happening in Redondo Beach, saying the county is pulling the same kind of content-based discrimination by restricting religious gatherings while allowing other types. It's like they're saying, hey, the Supreme Court already told you you can't do this.
And they're not messing around either. They've given the county a deadline of March 20th to grant church on the beach equal treatment.
Wow. So that's coming up fast.
Yeah.
Now, I get that the county has a responsibility to manage the beach for everyone. They've even said that their whole permitting process is about ensuring equitable beach access for everyone.
Yeah.
But how do they justify singling out religious groups like this?
That is the million-dollar question. And so far, their explanation has been pretty vague. They haven't really given a clear reason for why religious groups are being treated differently.
Yeah, something doesn't add up here.
Yeah.
We've got this church that's been operating peacefully for years, and now there's this policy that seems to be targeting them specifically. And we've got these strong legal arguments based on the public forum doctrine, but the county's not really giving us a straight answer as to why.
It's like we're missing a piece of the puzzle.
Right. What's their real motivation here? So that's what we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive. We'll look into the county's perspective and the potential impacts on the community and what this case could mean for the future of religious freedom.
Stay tuned because it's about to get really interesting.
It is. All right, so we've got this legal battle brewing, but let's not forget that this is all happening in a community with lots of different opinions. I'm curious, what are people in Redondo Beach saying about all this?
It's kind of a mixed bag, really. Like, you might expect some people are firmly on the county side.
Okay.
They see the beach as, a public resource that needs to be managed carefully. And they worry that letting one group have these big gatherings every week could give them an unfair advantage.
I can see that, like, if it's a megachurch taking over a huge chunk of the beach every Sunday.
Exactly. And they're probably thinking about the practical stuff, too. Noise, parking, even the impact on the environment.
Right, those are valid concerns.
Yeah.
I mean, beaches are delicate, and they can't handle unlimited crowds, and nobody wants to be stuck in traffic just trying to enjoy a day at the beach.
For sure. And then you've got the folks who are totally sympathizing with the church.
Okay.
They see this as like a clear case of religious discrimination.
Right.
They think the county is stepping on the church's right to practice their faith freely, especially since they've been doing it peacefully for so long.
Yeah, and for some people, it goes even deeper than that. It's like a sign of this growing hostility towards religion in public spaces.
It's like a slippery slope,
Exactly. Like, if
Amen.
they can restrict it on the beach, where does it stop?
And that really resonates with people who already feel like their beliefs are being pushed aside.
So you've got these really strong opinions on both sides, and it shows how hard it is to balance individual rights with what's best for the whole community.
Absolutely. And we have to remember that these aren't just abstract legal concepts we're talking about. They affect real people.
Right. For the
Yeah.
church members, being able to worship on the beach is a really personal thing.
Totally. They talk about feeling accepted there, connecting with their spirituality in a way that wouldn't be the same in a traditional church.
It's part of who they are, their community.
Exactly. And then for other people in the community, the beach means something different. Relaxation fun, a connection to nature. It's a resource they want to protect.
So how do you find a solution that makes everyone happy? It's tough.
It is, you need communication and empathy.
Okay.
I mean, imagine if the county and the church had talked more openly from the beginning.
Right.
Maybe they could have avoided this whole thing.
It's like they were so focused on their own side of things that they forgot to listen to each other.
Exactly. And that's where empathy is so important. Even if you don't agree with someone, you can try to see things from their perspective.
It can help you find common ground.
Totally. So we've talked about the church's side, but we should also think about the county's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
They're responsible for managing the beach for everyone.
Right.
So what are they thinking about as they try to make this decision?
That's a good question. What are some of the factors they're weighing?
Well, one of the big ones is definitely going to be fairness.
Okay.
They want to make sure everyone has an equal chance to enjoy the beach, whether they're swimming, sunbathing, playing volleyball, whatever.
And if one group is having a big event every week, that could limit other people's access.
Exactly. It could even cause resentment and conflict, which they definitely don't want.
And then there's a noise issue.
Oh, yeah. Nobody wants to be woken up by loud music or announcements on a Sunday morning.
Plus the whole logistics thing, parking, traffic flow, a big gathering could cause a lot of congestion.
And that impacts residents and businesses.
So it sounds like they're juggling a lot of different things. Fairness, practicality, residents, businesses. And they have to consider the legal stuff, too.
Definitely. They can't just do whatever they want. They have to make sure their actions are legal, and that includes respecting the First Amendment.
It's like they're walking a tightrope.
It is. And it's not just about avoiding a lawsuit. It's about maintaining the community's trust. They want to be seen as fair and impartial, protecting everyone's rights.
So it sounds like they're in a tough spot.
Yeah.
They're trying to be responsible managers of the beach while also respecting everyone in the community.
And that includes people who want to use the beach for religious reasons.
It's a complex situation, and finding a solution that works for everyone is going to require a lot of careful thought, open communication, and a willingness to compromise.
Totally. You know, something that doesn't get talked about enough in these discussions is the environment.
Oh, right. We were talking about the beach being a fragile ecosystem.
Exactly. And large gatherings can have a big impact, especially in coastal areas. Litter damage to plants disturbing wildlife.
It's sad, but you see it all the time. A beautiful beach trashed after a big event.
And it's not just about how it looks. It's about protecting the whole ecosystem for the future.
So the county has to think about that too, the environmental impact of any gathering, no matter what it's for.
For sure, they might need to limit the size of gatherings or require organizers to minimize their impact or even restrict gatherings in certain areas.
It's about finding that balance between letting people enjoy the beach and protecting it at the same time.
A tough balance.
It is. So we've got these legal arguments, community concerns, environmental considerations, all happening while everyone's getting more divided and distrustful.
It's like a mini version of the bigger problems we have as a society.
And it makes you think, how do we create spaces that are welcoming and sustainable? How do we talk to each other when everyone's so divided? How do we make sure everyone feels like they belong?
Big questions.
Huge ones. And I think this case, in its own small way, makes us think about those things.
I agree. So we've covered a lot of ground in this part, but there's still more to explore.
All right, we've got one more segment left in this deep dive, so let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about what this case might mean for the future of religious freedom in public spaces. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive, and I want to kind of zoom out a little bit and think about the bigger picture here.
I think that's a good idea. This is about more than just one church and one beach, you know?
Yeah, and one of the things that keeps coming to my mind is how much technology has changed things.
Oh, absolutely.
Like how we experience religion and public space, both. I mean, think about it. We've got online churches, virtual communities, social media where people can connect with like-minded folks all over the world.
It's amazing in a way. It's like technology has broken down barriers and made it easier to find a sense of belonging, even if it's online.
But it also makes you think, right? Like, what does it mean for those physical spaces like churches and beaches when so much of our lives are moving online, even our religious lives?
That's a really interesting question, and it goes back to what we were talking about before about the beach being like a sanctuary for some of those church members. Like, that's where they find a connection they don't get elsewhere. But what if people are finding that same connection online? Does that make those physical spaces less important?
It's a tough one. I don't know if there's a clear answer. Maybe for some people, the digital world is enough. But for others, maybe that need for face-to-face interaction, for shared experiences in a real place, becomes even stronger.
It's like a push and pull between the virtual and the physical.
Exactly.
And it makes me wonder, how do we make sure that both of those spaces, the physical and the virtual, are welcoming and inclusive and meaningful in this weird hybrid world we're living in?
That's a challenge, but it's also an exciting opportunity, I think,
Yeah.
to figure out how we can use technology to make us feel more connected rather than more isolated.
I love that. And it kind of ties into something else we were talking about earlier, too. All that polarization we see in society, especially around religion and politics.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like you can't even have a conversation about those things anymore without it turning into a fight.
It's like we've forgotten how to disagree respectfully.
And I think that's where cases like this one are so important because they force us to face those tough questions about how we live together, how we balance rights and needs, how we make sure everyone feels welcome, even if we don't agree on everything.
It's not easy, but it's crucial.
You know, one of the things that I find so inspiring about this whole case is just the resilience of the people involved.
Yeah.
I mean, they're up against this huge obstacle, but they're not backing down. They're fighting for what they believe in, and they're doing it with a lot of grace.
It's a good reminder that hope and perseverance can really make a difference.
And it reminds us that we all have a part to play in creating a more just and inclusive world, even in our own little corners of it.
Absolutely.
We can start by listening to each other, trying to see things from different perspectives, and standing up for everyone's rights.
You know, as we wrap up here, I'm feeling a mix of emotions. I'm a little worried because of all those challenges we've talked about, the division, the intolerance, the lack of trust. But I'm also hopeful because there are so many people out there who are working to make things better.
I feel the same way.
Hmm.
And I think this case is a small part of that bigger story. It shows that even when things are tough, there's always a chance for dialogue, for understanding, for finding some common ground.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today, but we want to leave you with something to think about. How can you be a force for good in your own community? How can you help create a world where everyone feels like they belong and they're treated with respect?
It's a good question for all of us to consider.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.